V bounces should not be the norm, and they've been the norm for 40 years. And I think that the age of V bounces is over. How's that? There's a bold prediction. I think the next time we go down, we're going down and we're going to lay on our backs. And I think we're going to pull a Nikkei.
Was Trump given a hot potato in the form of the markets?
Yes. I think he knows it. The guys who say, oh, this is going to be great, life's going to be great because now Trump's there. And I have no trouble with the idea that he could revitalize our economy, at least get it started. It'd take way longer than that. But we have problems that are insurmountable. And so what's insurmountable? Well, first of all,
you're watching Capital Cosm. My name is Danny, and today's guest is Dave Collum. Dave, thank you so much for coming back on, my friend, and happy 2025.
Yeah, glad to be back. This time of year gets a little busy for me, but I'm happy to be here and happy to chat with you because we have smart discussions both on and off camera.
Yeah, yeah, we do.
Some of the best discussions I've ever had were after the after the podcast.
Yeah. I mean, that's typically how it goes, but let's just dive right in here, Dave, on camera this time. What is the top story for you right now? What is occupying your radar screen at the moment? What do you want to talk about?
Well, so I am, as you know, but your audience might not know, I write an annual year in review, and I finished parts 1 and 2, and it rips my soul out. I mean, it really is tough to do. It's combine the two, if you converted them to Microsoft Word pages instead of web page, probably 250 pages so far. So it's a book about the year, and it's whatever catches my eye. And I'm not trying to hawk it. At some level, my brain is saying, I don't think your readership is big enough to justify your effort. But in part, I do it for me because I write myself to wisdom. So I when Roe v. Wade, for example, came, I wrote about it, and I wrote about various Supreme Court decisions and stuff relating to it, in part to explore the topic. And I've learned as a scientist, a project does not finish until you've written the paper. That's one thing that anyone who's a careful experimentalist will tell you is until that's a coherent story on the page, you go, okay, the I's are dotted, T's are crossed, that sort of thing. Or in my age, the T's are dotted and the I's are crossed. And I've been working on, so I do weird things. Like I'll get on a theme and there's no predicting. So I did write about the election, but about 5 weeks after it. And so, because it changed everything. And so I had probably 200 pages of notes on Harris and Biden and stuff. They became irrelevant, right? Real fast. And there's some that's relevant, and I talk about some of it, but I come at it from a different angle. I look at the history of the modern era presidencies to put it in context, starting with Woodrow Wilson, and talk about what a bunch of douchebags we have elected through the years. And I am going to write about Kamala. I think Kamala, this will hit your audience hard. I think Kamala is a product of MK Ultra. I think the day I was paying attention to it a little bit, and then it really caught my attention when someone of great prominence who knows that world said she shows all the fragmented personality traits that you'd expect. And so I'm going to piece that together for part 3. Now, what's on my head? Part 3 is Heart of Darkness. Part 3 is, which I tried to write. I started writing it last year, and it was just too big for me. It was just too much unknowns, and it's about trafficking and stuff like that, pedophilia, and at some level, I wish I'd written it because now it's being talked about, and so you're not ahead of this. You're not the tip of the spear anymore. And so, for example, I watched Cheryl Atkinson yesterday. She did part 2 on Ashley Babbitt shooting, and I wrote about Ashley Babbitt shooting, and there are so many problems with that story, and so I sent it to Cheryl last night. Actually, I'd watched part 1, and I talked to her a little bit digitally, about what I knew that she hadn't picked up on, but she picked up on the fact that Ashley Babbitt's shooting had problems all over it. But it was like 3 years later. I wrote about it when it happened. And so I sent it to her, and it'll be interesting to see what her response is. I haven't checked my Twitter DMs yet, but so in any case, I was going to write about it last year, and I was going to write about women and transgender women in sports and all that stuff, and it just wasn't soup yet, right? As I used to say in an old TV commercial, is it soup yet? It was an ad for soup, and so it's been in the crock pot for a year. I was going to really get serious about it yesterday, and I started reading Elon Musk's tweets about the rape gangs in Europe, and he's gone bananas on that. And it kind of hit me like a truck yesterday, where I'm going, the world is coming at us too quickly. So we've got drones, we've got exploding Teslas that don't make sense. We've got all sorts of Israel Gaza stuff and Ukraine Putin stuff, and I realized that we can't metabolize the information fast enough to keep up, and that started to hit me like a truck.
And it's exhausting too. It's exhausting.
It's exhausting
to trying to digest it.
And it is exhausting. And so I took about a week and a half off from looking at any social media of any kind and any news of any kind. Just said, look, I got to write. And you can't write 250 pages easily. It is a religious experience to do that at the end of a year, right? This is not banging out 10 pages. Here's the summary of 2024. This is 250. I know I'm babbling. And I took about a week and a half off, and I come back and peek at the world, and Assad was gone. And I go, what? Right? Assad's gone? What just happened, right? And I don't know. I haven't been able to catch up. I don't know the events that occurred leading up. And so I had several epiphanies. One is, if you stop listening even briefly, you go off the plot. And this year I wrote about a revised history of World War II, for example, and I did a podcast with one of the authors. I read about 6 books that sort of went at World War II from a different angle. And I realized I was going to write just book reports, which I do, but I said, no, there's a story here. So I wrote the revised history of World War II, gave a talk to 500 people in 20 minutes, the revised history of World War II. Try to do that in 20 minutes, right? But I did it. And I did a podcast with a woman, and she used to be on Lou Dobbs twice a week. And she says, she says, I got fired for saying something that I thought was innocuous. She said, I started writing my book again. And then she realized she could not make progress on her book. You can't do deep thinking or serious writing while trying to keep up with current events on a day-by-day basis. And it's almost like it's not just you don't have the time, but you're being distracted. So I'm writing about energy, and I go, oh, there's a puzzle piece, and you're trying to pull it together. And to finish that little chapter, maybe I should just talk my way through my year in review. It turns out Stalin controlled the flow of the war in ways that most people just don't know. Stalin was FDR's right-hand man, a guy named Harry Hopkins, was a Soviet spy. He was like Huma Abedin to Hillary. He was chief of staff of a kind they used to joke that he was president. He was that influential, and he was a Soviet spy. And so everything FDR did, and it's unclear, but you got to think FDR knew he was doing things with the Soviets. He couldn't have been that oblivious. He was an incompetent person, it turns out, except for lying, compulsive lying. He was a great compulsive. So he got elected 4 times. So I dug through the Great Depression. I dug through World War II. Funny story. She mentioned, so Diana West is the woman's name, who wrote the book that really caught my attention, and who I did the podcast with. And she she mentioned a guy named Stephen Coughlin in her book In Passing, who's the goat of the Pentagon for radical Islam. So he's the guy at the Pentagon who knew the most about radical Islam. And she happened to just mention him, that he had gone to the Pentagon. And I don't even remember why this contemporaneous anecdote came out in the history of World War II, but it did. Well, I happen to know Stephen. So I reached out to Stephen and I asked, is Diana credible? Because this book is a completely different history of World War II that she's done here. And he said, she's totally credible. The neocons went at her. She had to go into hiding, basically. And so then I'm a little bit of visible exchange between Diana and I on Twitter, and I get an email from a guy named Sean McMeekin. Now, I didn't know it. I had emails from Sean from about 3 years back, and I didn't remember them. But he sent me an email. He says, now you have to read Stalin's War. Well, Stalin's War was written by Sean McMeekin. And so I said, okay, screw it. I'll read Stalin's War, which is a much bigger read. I do audio, by the way. So when I say read, my wife says that's not reading. I go, Helen Keller used her fingers. I use my ears. Use your eyes. Get over it. And Sean filled in a lot of gaps, a lot of stuff. A much more elaborate things Stalin did and things we knew. And then I dug into the Pearl Harbor, and then I dug into the Great Depression, and I sort of came at FDR, and I concluded that FDR was a total sociopath of a profoundly higher order and did terrible, terrible things. And so, and then there's a guy named Daryl Cooper, who's very controversial, who apparently has been digging very deep into this stuff, and I have not had time. In any event, it's this increasing sense that I can't keep up. And so then I'm listening to Matt Taibbi, who I've met twice. I had dinner with him once, and a guy who I really like named Walter Kirn, Kirn, and they do these podcasts together, and they were talking about a bunch of these topics, and Walter said, if you think you understand what you're seeing, you're dreaming. So they tore apart the Tesla explosion, and I'd gotten most of it already. But to listen to those two really big brain guys sort of tease their way through and laughing about it and coming up with really spectacularly clever ways of tearing it apart. Did you see the, I'm really schizophrenic here this morning. I apologize. Did you see that after the guy's Tesla blew up, a reporter went through the guy's apartment? Did you catch that?
Was it the guy who blew up the Tesla, or the New Orleans?
The Tesla.
I thought it was a New Orleans guy who ran over a bunch of people.
No, the New Orleans guy was an Arab guy. The Tesla guy, I think, was. This is where I'm having trouble keeping up.
Yeah, I think it's a New Orleans guy who they went into his apartment. Like, are you talking about that one lady reporter that went through the apartment?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was a New Orleans.
Okay. It could be.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna have to check my notes on that. They pointed out the absurdity. She goes through it. She goes, "Oh, look, here's the bomb-making materials, and here's the Quran open to a page." And you go, "This is a bad, CSI crime scene, right? This is really a terrible setup." And they were laughing about it too. And so the door had been smashed up. They said the FBI just left. I go, and they left all these bomb-making materials, and there's recipes for bombs. It turns out that, I don't know if it's true. This is what is a fact problem we all face. What's true, what's not. The woman's supposedly a Mossad agent, right? She's not a reporter. And I'm going, oh my God, this is just getting insane, right? So I've had this problem where as I'm digging into pedophilia networks and trafficking and it's all connected. And now this Keir Starmer guy is about to get his ass handed to him for, sort of protecting pedophiles. This is breaking, I think, today, maybe. And so I am going to write about this stuff. I'm not positive I'm going to publish it because there's some unbelievably libelous accusations that have been made. And if I can't, I have to be able to write it in a way where I'm not libelous. Right. But famous Hollywood actors and stuff, things they've done, famous politicians, things they've done. We I think might have talked off camera on some of this stuff,
Most
and
likely, yeah.
it's things that you can't imagine a human doing to another human, right? I read Stephen Pinker's book about the Middle Ages and about the history of violence, and he would say, I could be saying looking at Adolf Hitler, and I would think of doing that, what they used to do to guys, right? And this is at that level by famous politicians to kids, and and I don't know how to confirm or refute it. I'm supposed to chat with some very important people in this world. They've agreed to chat with me. Um, One person is, I think, a good person deeply embedded in the official system, having to do with the children, and I don't understand it yet. But she's agreed to talk to me,
On
and
or off
it'll be
camera?
off camera. Oh, off camera. Yeah, that would be a fun film. Yeah, no, I wouldn't get shit out of her on camera. And I'm hoping to have her just say, "Don't go there. That's a ruse. That's not." I'm hoping to get some guidance. And I know her husband, and he wasn't going to tell me anything. And then he kind of got agitated. It was one of those post podcast chats, and he started talking. He was dying to say something, and he it slowly leaked out. And I think he told me more than he wanted his wife. But I finally said, "Could you ask your wife if there's some way I can be steered?" And he said, "I'll talk to her." And he said, "My wife has agreed to talk to you." And so I'm going to have a chat. And I said, "I'll tell you what, I will reach out to you when I'm ready to have that chat." And
What do you need to get ready?
I really have to organize the package. I really have to do at least rough out a draft. And it's going to be probably 130 pages, so it's not soon.
Gotcha. Well, trying to untangle everything you just mentioned here, Dave. You did mention FDR and the dictatorial powers that he took during his rule. Do you think that, as a fourth turning president like he was, I mean, because he was a fourth turning president in the same way that Lincoln was. Many people make the same accusations towards Lincoln.
The funny thing is fourth turning guys don't give the Civil War a big fourth turning statistical weighting. They downplay that one. It's kind of like a more of a flicker.
So are we due for another? I mean, is Trump going to be a fourth turning president? Is he going to just take up some of these authoritarian powers like some of his predecessors did? Because we are entering a war cycle. We are entering these resource wars and these the wars of all kind. Will he have to?
Biden is a fourth turning president. Let's start with that one.
Yeah.
Right. Biden's a fourth turning. It might be the first half of the fourth turning or the first, quarter or whatever, tend to be about 20 years apiece, as you know. I don't know how much your audience knows, so I try to fill in some gaps. And that was a catastrophic presidency, in my opinion, because it underscored the absurdity of the world, right? The fact that we had a guy who was demented, and the way I like to describe the problem, I read Annie Jacobson's book, The Nuclear War, and I wouldn't because I don't normally read nonfiction, but it's marginally nonfiction. So she creates a scenario of how we get to a nuclear war. But she talked to all the big guns in the field and said, okay, here's what happened next. So in many ways, she was wargaming the nuclear war in her book. And I wasn't going to read it. And then Jeff Sachs said it was really a great book and said, okay, I'm going to read it now. If you imagine the Cuban Missile Crisis, and it goes out exactly as it went, except for you pull Kennedy out. Now, this is not a love of Kennedy, although I think he's not bad, actually. A bit of a horn dog, but you just pull the main guy out. So what do you have? You have who do we know about who was making decisions in that room? It was Kennedy. The rest of the people were really just voices, these faint voices of history, where if you asked a person on the street, who were they? They could not name them. The great risk is when the decision is actually being made by those people. Now, this is not Annie Jacobson's idea. It just reinforced this concern I've had. So you take Kennedy out and say, what would have happened? Now you'd have these voices just talking to each other. And we would have gotten into a nuclear war, in my opinion. The reason we didn't is because there was a person at the top, and it could be anybody in theory. Mm-hmm. It could be Carter, it could be Reagan, it could be anyone. But that person has to be able to say, this is on me. This is my call. I don't like the fact I have to make this call, but history's going to write a terrible chapter if I botch this one. And they have this unbelievable nagging horror that they have to get it right. And Kennedy got it right. And he could have gotten it wrong. Biden would not have been that person. I think Trump would have, but even as a Trump fan, I'm not comfortable with the idea of him deciding about the nuclear football because of his. I'd rather have Bill Clinton making that call. I'd rather have Obama making that call. Actually, I'd rather have Hillary making that call because they're likely to be more thoughtful than Trump, in my opinion. He's a hip shooter, but he would be the guy making that call. Biden wouldn't, and I don't think Harris would have. And that's what had me so troubled about Harris. Biden was immoral at levels that I find inexcusable. Harris was amoral. I don't think she had any moral compass at all, which is why I took this whole idea serious that she might be an MK Ultra product. We could have, and I don't know what probability to put on it, but I'm going to try to write my way to wisdom on this one. It's not trivial probability. We could have had a Manchurian candidate as president. We could have had a person who was waiting for someone to give some safety word, and then boom, she'd go off and do something. And I've had conversations with at least one famous journalist where I said, look, I think all the shootings, for example, are brainwashed people. I don't think. He thinks that the Saudis tried to take out Mohammed bin Salman, and then the plot thickens. And you say, well, where'd the Saudi helicopters come from? Well, it turns out they train at an army base 200 miles away.
In Las Vegas? I mean, trying to take him out. Was he in Las Vegas?
He was on the top floor of the Mandalay. So that they thought they knew what his security team would do. They would rush him out, and then they would get him, and somehow they missed him. I don't know how. But Colin's theory is that the Saudis then called our guys and said, look, we did it. You got to cover it up. Take it from here. And so the plot thickener is, remember when Khashoggi got killed? It's not Anand. Anand's this famous brother who's CIA. The other Khashoggi, who was also CIA, New York Times journalist, but he got sliced and diced and fed to the camels.
Khashoggi was, I believe, didn't Epstein buy a yacht from him? Like $100?
Yeah. Adnan Khashoggi's famous CIA. He's everywhere. Okay. I mean, he's as omnipresent as Maxwell, right? Robert Maxwell. He's that level kind of guy. But his brother's the one who got sliced and diced, and I think he was CIA too. And he supposedly helped set it up. And on the anniversary of, and when Khashoggi got killed, there's all this hubbub about Khashoggi getting killed, New York Times journalist. I called him ODK, one dead Khashoggi. So we're slaughtering people in the Middle East by the millions. And all we give a shit about is one goddamn guy who got sliced and diced in the Saudi embassy. Made no sense to me. So supposedly, MBS sliced and diced Khashoggi, had a party that people thought was a normal party, locked the doors, and showed the video of Khashoggi getting sliced and diced on the anniversary of the shooting, of the Vegas shooting, and said, don't fuck with me. And
that's
it's an interesting theory, and all it is a theory. But this is these rabbit holes go deep and they're infinite, and you don't know when you're being sent down a rabbit hole and when you're actually on a lead. And
or if it's a red herring. I mean, a
that
lot of these
yeah, a fake rabbit hole.
and I'm seeing it on X. I mean, it's gone completely the other end of the spectrum. While as in Twitter 1.0, it was complete censorship. You couldn't talk about anything controversial, really.
Now it's bullshit.
Yeah,
Right.
and Twitter 2.0 or X, the zone has just been flooded with everything. I mean, yes, there's truth. We have more propensity for truth there, or truth can come out there much more freely than Twitter 1.0, but you've got to like wade through so much junk nowadays. Like,
well, it's like when Enron went south. Somebody went to the Yahoo message boards. Remember those? Years back,
yeah.
the Yahoo message board, pre-Twitter, is where they would chatter about a stock. And they went to the Yahoo message board, and the whole story was right there. But you don't know. I had a biotech stock that tanked pretty badly this year, but I had a truly tiny amount. And I found this something like Pharma Cafe or something, and the stock was getting hammered, but it smelled like the same person hammering it. Someone had reached out to me and said, blah, blah, tried to warn me about the stock. And I didn't trust him. And for all I know, it's the same guy hammering it on, Pharma Cafe. And you can, naked short a stock into oblivion. And so I got this, I had this one possible theory that there were guys naked shorting this company, and that they did not need some guy with a reasonable following out saying that this looks like an interesting buy. That's not what they wanted. So they maybe tried to wave me off it. I don't know, because it was doing okay. I haven't given up on it, but it was like 0.2% of my portfolio. So it could go to zero and I could be bright green that day. One of those stocks, right? And and the bullshit out there. I was telling you about the show Landman, about the oil patch. They said something really interesting. I think it's a well-researched stock. He said, look, we got to keep the oil between, 70 and 78 and blah, blah. He gives this range, and I go, that's where oil's sitting. He says, if it gets above here, the pain is too much. If it gets below here, we don't make as much money. This is the range we want to park oil. And
it's at 70. It's flirting with 75 at the moment. What do you make of these rising energy prices? What's eliciting this move up in oil, and not just oil, natural gas as well? You start to see the uranium sector move as well. What's going on here, in your opinion?
Well, I went bullish on uranium. I owned some Cameco for years. I went emotionally bullish. I have to be careful there. One time I was at a founders dinner, hedge fund founders. I was sitting across, about 8 of us. I was sitting across the table from guys who own sports teams. And I'm sitting there going, why am I here? I don't remember starting a hedge fund, but the guy invited me. And what I found was, first of all, they seemed siloed, with the exception of one of them who I'm good friends with, who was very broadly knowledgeable. The others seemed to only know their niche. And I said that we were supposed to give an idea, and I gave one idea. And it was RSX. And of course we know RSX went to zero.
Was that the Russian index?
Yeah. Now, I had gotten bullish on that before the Ukraine war, but I had a tiny little position. And one day Grant Williams said, you really want to be contrarian. This thing was selling with, packed full of energy and stuff.
Yeah, I bought a number of these cheap Russian stocks back during the onset of the Ukraine war for like 80%
now. The moral of the
off.
story is be careful with places that don't have a history of creating wealth. Right. I own some South American platinum miners, and they've beat me up pretty good too. And they seem really cheap, but there's places that create wealth and places that don't. And you got to be careful. So that's why I'm not, like Grantham always talks about going deep value foreign, right? And it's not my wheelhouse. I can't tell when I'm buying cheap or when I'm buying garbage. I can't. So I'm not a stock picker. So I try to get trends, right? So I got trends right until the teens. I nailed critical trends until the teens. And then for 3 out of 4 decades, I nailed them. And then Mr. Smarty Pants got pounded because I was heavily cash. I'd been gold for 10 years. I made a ton of gold. And I had made a ton on energy because I didn't see the commodity bull coming. What I saw was what I thought would be bad inflation. And so around 2000, 2001, I was 100% cash and gold in 99 by the end of 99 after making 700% on WorldCom, right? That I went from tech bull to uber bear when I finally figured out the markets were fucked up. And so I felt like a genius. So I compounded 13% in the knots annualized. No one compounded 13% in the knots, right? But I did. And then I wrote my first annual review, which I think was why I got a good readership, because I really had nailed it. But I'm at this dinner and I picked RSX. Then afterwards, I told the one guy who was there I know well is David Einhorn. And I said, I don't have a big position. He said, well, when you make a call like that, people presume a big position. I go, no, I just think it's a great idea. So I went long. I was in energy until the mid-teens, caught some of the downslope. Literally, not my decision. I got flushed out of all my energy funds by my employer, who said they were too risky. I go, really? Fidelity energy funds are too risky? And they flushed me out. I didn't even notice because I don't watch the statements. I literally just watch some screen. And about a year later, they'd saved me a lot of money by flushing me out. But I didn't have, I thought in 2009 we had another halving in our future. I was right based on logic. So when we got to the bottom, what turned out to, in retrospect, be the bottom in 2009, we were at about historical average valuation. We were not cheap. And if someone wants to, doesn't believe that, I'll show them a plot, right? Just pick up the Case-Shiller PE, right? Just look at it. It dipped below fair. I had dinner with Mark Spitznagel one night. He said, yeah, it was gone. It was below it about a month. When you're below fair value, historical average value for a month, there's something wrong there, right? You should really, there should be some real pounding going on at the bottom. You should be forming a bottom. It shouldn't, V bounces should not be the norm, and they've been the norm for 40 years. And I think that the age of V bounces is over. How's that? There's a bold prediction. I think the next time we go down, we're going down and we're going to lay on our backs. And I think we're going to pull a Nikkei.
Was Trump given a hot potato in the form of the markets?
Yes. I think he knows it. The guys who say, oh, this is going to be great, life's going to be great because now Trump's there. And I have no trouble with the idea that he could revitalize our economy, at least get it started. It'd take way longer than that. But we have problems that are insurmountable. And so what's insurmountable? Well, first of all, our unfunded liabilities are so big, there's a default in our future. I don't know how. You say inflation, okay. People cavalierly say, whoa, we'll just inflate it away. And I said, okay, so we each own, according to unfunded liabilities, we each own $2 million, right? I haven't budgeted for $2 million to be paid to somebody, right? I wouldn't be crushed by it, to be honest, but it's not in my plans. But it is. Somehow our unfunded liabilities are $250 trillion. So divide that by the number of taxpayers. It's an ugly number. And you can say, we'll never pay it back. I go, it's building. It's growing. If it was just sitting there, that would be one thing. It's not an infinite thing. It's an infinitely expanding thing. And we've got our budget, our deficit is compounding at 7%. Our GDP, if you believe the inflation numbers, is growing at 2.5%, nothing special. And it's probably, I'm guessing our GDP hasn't grown for years. I'm guessing if you measured inflation correctly. And so you can't grow your way out. And then on top of all that, the markets are, crudely speaking, right now, 200% above fair value, historical average value. And beware of average valuations that go back 50 years. They're not the right ones. So my average valuation, and this is, I think you should do this, is from the ideal plots like from 1880 to 1990. That sets a baseline for me. That's the 20th century. That's a period of great wealth creation. Robert Gordon, if you haven't read Robert Gordon's book, I can't remember. It's about wealth creation. It's got wealth creation in the title. And the average valuation during that period, it's just a channel. It's channelingstocks.com. Valuation shouldn't trend, right? If it trends, it means you're getting less and less return on what you're buying, right? If you buy some stock that has a P of 100, you're buying a 1% cash flow. And you can get all hot and bothered about how you think it's a growth stock. So let's say they organically, not through inflation, but they organically grow their earnings. They double them, right? How long does it take to double earnings? I don't know. Now you're getting 2%, right? It just doesn't. Then double them again. You're getting 4%, right? Great. You can't grow your way out of high valuations. It takes so if you're 200% over fair value and you say, look, we're going to block and tackle our way out, right? So what's that mean? Well, so if the markets are obviously going to have an inflationary push, but you're not making any money. That's just a fraud. And so let's say the markets track inflation, so you're treading water. So use any economist who doesn't inflation adjust should get his PhD taken away. And let's say you grow your way out. Let's assume that the GDP grows at 2.5%, which the 20th century is around 2.2, 2.3. And that's a pretty good century. So if you think the 21st is going to go faster, you're an idiot, right? It might, but it's not a bet I would make comfortably. And so let's just say it grows about the same. Let's give it a 2.5%. To block and tackle your way out, it takes 45 years. So what I can tell you is based on fifth grade math, is it's a state function. In physical science, that means it doesn't matter how you get there. The path is independent. If 45 years from now, the market is at what I call historical average valuation, 1880 to 1990 average valuation, which, by the way, Case-Shiller is sitting at 38. It was cheap at 6, right? That's a factor of 6 growth in the valuation. Valuation shouldn't trend. In 45 years, if we've grown the economy without moving the stock price on an inflation-adjusted basis, you will be at exactly the same point 45 years from now. And that's happened before. This is not unprecedented. From 1906 to I think it's 1981 or something, the market treaded water. People don't know that. They don't know. If you ignore changes in valuations, the market, Buffett says you can make about 4%. That includes dividends. It does not include taxes. It does include fees. Guy named Ron Grice of the Chart Store corrects the market cap for M2 money supply. It's a great chart. So he shows the growth in the S&P, inflation adjusted, not inflation adjusted. And then he corrects not using some CPI bullshit, but he uses M2, which strikes me as a pretty good inflation metric, which, by the way, they stopped reporting for some reason. I wonder why. Over the 20th century, from 1925 to the present. And it turns out the market cap goes down. Throw inflation in there. Turns out inflation, when it was dirt cheap in 1920, that zone, and dividends were like 6%. And now they're 1.5%, which means the market, if you want to use just dividends as a metric for valuation, we're way overvalued. You're priced to get a 1.5% dividend, where historically it's around 4 something, 4.4. And so to get back to historical average dividends, to get historical average returns, to get what you're told history has done for us, we got a lot of blocking and tackling ahead of us. And so I thought the market, when it hit historical average valuation, had another halving in our future. I made a mistake. What I should have done is said, okay, at this valuation, how many equities should I own? I should have ignored the path dependence. And I should have said, at historical average valuation, what percentage should I have in equities? I had so much cash. And I bought some tobacco and a
That's
little
the
bit of this, a
pragmatic
little bit of
approach.
that.
That's the pragmatic
Right.
approach.
Well,
Right.
but that's the mistake that I made because I said, no, we've got a halving in our future. And the Fed said, oh, no, you don't. Drop $30 trillion. Not all the central banks. And nobody saw 30 trillion. Do you know anyone who could make a case they saw 30 trillion coming? I've asked people, do you know of anyone who saw it coming? And some people say, oh, yeah, I saw it coming. I go, show me. And they go, well, I said they do whatever they have to. I go, that's not 30 trillion, dude. Whatever they have to is a big, bold statement of nothing. Right? Sure, I could say that on a daily basis, do whatever they have to. But if you'd said put a number on it, when Bear Stearns got bailed out for 30 billion, the oxygen sucked out of the room. And that's chump change. Then we get 700 billion. Oh my God, that's chump change. We're now talking like COVID was $7 trillion. We're in, psychedelic acid trip stage of monetary policy. And so I am willing to predict that we have a default in our future somewhere because I don't think there is a way out. This is you've fallen off El Capitan, you're partway down. You're going to hit bottom. You're going to be the coyote who hits bottom. The coyote, maybe he's looking down now. I hate trite metaphors, by the way, so I can't believe I'm mentioning Wile E. Coyote. I like to invent my own. They're usually disgusting. So we can't win from here. Traders can win. But if you think you've got an advantage over all those other tens of millions of traders, have a nice day. I don't think you do. Because unless you're an insider and Danny, I'm guessing the real insiders are not watching us right now. I think
so?
I think retail is watching us. I do not believe the guys who control the system. I even had a realization, and someone else, this came from an Akerlof paper, the Berkeley professor, who I've also reached out to. I have a networking gene. I don't know what it is. I was talking to a guy on the phone the other night, and I was trying to figure out if some spook. I'm being so random today.
You've got your tentacles all over the place here, Dave. I mean,
yeah, I really do. I was talking to this guy and some cyber spook. I couldn't figure out if he was real. He's either a grandiose narcissist or a deeply embedded spook. And I was on several signal calls with him, and I finally I wanted nothing to do with him. I decided he was toxic either way. But to check him out, I actually reached out to the president of Microsoft. The guy supposedly owned a computer company and was deeply techie. So I reached out to the former president of Microsoft.
You talked to the president of Microsoft.
He's a friend of mine. It turns out it's a guy named Steve Sinofsky, who was under Ballmer after Gates left. And he left Microsoft, I think, because he realized he wasn't going to get top dog spot. He said, I'm out of here. He was number 3 at Microsoft when Gates was at the top. So there's Gates, Ballmer, and then he was president of what's called Microsoft Windows. He's president of Microsoft Windows. That is Microsoft, right at the time. And he said, I don't know the guy. And then I reached out to the founder, pre-Netscape IPO code writer, founder of Mozilla, founder of Brave, Brendan Eich. Said, do you know this guy? And he said, no, I don't know him. And then I reached out to a Canadian intelligence guy who this guy mentioned, who I happen to know. And he said, I don't know this guy. So I said, okay, he's a grandiose narcissist. And he was toxic. And he started to drop the anti-Semite shit on me. And I just said, I'm out of here. I'm gone. In any event, I network. And I don't even know where I'm going. Steer me, Danny. Pull me in here because my brain's racing right now.
Yeah, so you network with this guy. What was the next outcome? What happened next?
I can't remember. I
Well,
really
anyways,
am schizophrenic.
while you think about that, I do have a viewer question from one of our paid members on Substack.
Is this live? Is this live, or is this pre-written to
No,
me?
this is pre-recorded.
Okay.
Yeah, so one of my paying subscribers on Substack, his question to you was, what is Dave's game plan for 2025 in reducing unregrettable Twitter seconds spend time on the platform?
I
Well, hey, I think it's time to wrap it up here, Dave. I actually have to run in a bit, but thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for tolerating me. I was alone today. I try to
That's why
rein it in,
that's
but
why we bring you on, my friend. What is your Twitter handle, Dave, for people who want to see more of
David
your work?
David B. Collum.
David B. Collum. All right, we'll have a link
Yeah.
to that down below, guys. So be sure to check it out. Dave, thank you so much for coming on, my friend. Guys, thank you so much for watching. If you got value out of this video, give me a like. Type "Go Dave Go" in the comment section and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. If you want to watch the full uncensored version of this video, check out my Substack, capitalcosm.substack.com. Become a paying member. It's an easy way to support the channel and to watch content that you're not allowed to on YouTube. All right, guys. I'll catch you next time. Bye, y'all.